Уважаемые участники Третьего Московского урбанистического форума, пленарное заседание на тему «Сбалансированное развитие современного мегаполиса. Возможность или необходимость» начинается в зале А. Напоминаем вам, что из зала А ведется прямая трансляция в залы Б и С на -1 этаже.
Dear participants of the Third Moscow Urban Forum, the Plenary Session, Balanced Development of a Modern Megacity, Opportunity or Necessity, is now starting. Please be advised that sessions in Hall A are broadcast live to halls B and C on floor -1. Thank you.
Дамы и господа, мы приглашаем на сцену модератора сессии господина Грега Кларка.
Ladies and gentlemen, we invite to the stage the moderator of the session, Mr. Greg Clark.
Уважаемые дамы и господа, доброе утро. Это наше открытие Московского урбанистического форума 2013 «Мегасити». Мое большое удовольствие быть модератором нашей сессии сегодня утренней. И у нас с нами сегодня имеется 3000 зарегистрированных делегатов, 100 городов из 35 стран и 20 мэров и губернаторов из российских городов. Через несколько минут вас будет приветствовать мэр города Москвы на этом форуме, но прежде всего мне хотелось бы представить вам наших главных участников и выступающих, которые будут принимать участие на этой сессии, на первой пленарной сессии. Пожалуйста, будем приветствовать сейчас, по мере того, как будет приходить сюда господин Эдвард Листер, заместитель мэра Лондона, Дела Франко и Сапрайра, мистер Ясуси и
Director of Project Meganon, and Mr. Justin McGurk, Editor-in-Chief of Strelka Press. Now that our guests are here and they are taking their seats, we will be joined by our host, the Mayor of Moscow, Mr. Sergei Sobyanin. Thank you very much.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, it is not the first time that we are holding this urban forum, and every year the interest to this forum is attracting more and more specialists in urban technologies and the people who are not indifferent to the development of their megalopolises, megacities, and especially I would like to welcome my colleagues coming from the constituencies of the Russian Federation, the mayors of the cities of the guests from major megacities that also are present in this hall and who will help us address the issues and the trends and development of megalopolises throughout the world, including our beloved city of Moscow. The interest to the problems of the development of cities is still strong, and I'm confident that such forums will continue in the coming year, attracting more participants, interesting projects, and the results of such serious research. Popularization of the main idea, the city, convenient for its citizens, for its residents. It also penetrates the architectural medium and those politicians who are responsible for the development of their cities. It seems to be that this premise is absolutely clear. In the meantime, when we confront practice, we also can see that this is not always so. And sometimes our cities are becoming less and less attractive in view of their global growth and rapid development. And we all need to understand that such trends, essentially, they lead to the situation that the cities start withering off and dying, and we need developing and thriving cities. And the thriving of our cities, first and foremost, has to be based on the thriving of its citizens, prosperity of its citizens, so that its residents feel comfortable in their cities. I have to say that the topic of development of the cities is important, not only for Moscow, the city that is rapidly developing in the past 10 years, and it will continue to develop, and also throughout the world, because the process of urbanization embraces all the continents of this planet. And today, over 50% of the population live in the cities throughout the world, and this trend is increasing with every coming year. I also have to acknowledge that today's topic, the main topic of this forum, which is city peripheries and suburban areas, are very important for our city as well. And most of the Muscovites live in the so-called sleeping quarters that have taken shape throughout the history of the city. In the meantime, we have to admit that it is not only just sleeping areas, it's also where the people spend most of their lives, and we have to do everything we can so that they could feel comfortable in those sleeping quarters. In addition to the development of the city peripheries, we have to discuss many other areas pertaining to the development of the cities, and I hope that all of you will be taking active part in the roundtables and the seminar. And in addition to our working meetings, I invite all of you to be familiarized with Moscow. Moscow that is preparing for Christmas, for the New Year, which is being decorated. So I wish all of you not only good productive work, but also a good occasion. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you very much indeed. We are all very grateful that you are hosting us here in Moscow. We will now hear a message from the Mayor of London, Mr. Boris Johnson.
Здравствуйте, everybody. I'm Boris Johnson. I'm the Mayor of London. I'm very sorry I can't be with you today for the Moscow Urban Forum, but I want to congratulate you on the subject that you have chosen, which is megacities, success beyond the centre. Because if you look at the history of London, there's no doubt that traditionally everybody has assumed that the principal economic activity would take place in a pretty confined space in the centre of town. And if you look at famous Russians, for instance, who have lived in London, you had Lenin in Bloomsbury, you had Stalin in Whitechapel. The only famous Russian I can discover who lived in our great suburbs was Peter Kropotkin, the famous anarchist who lived in Bromley, of course. But all that is now changing, and we are seeing the explosion of new growth hubs in outer London, whether it is Croydon or Brent Cross or the phenomenal growth that we're seeing in the east of the city in the Stratford Olympic Park and the area around there. I know that you in Moscow are undergoing the same kind of expansion as we are in London. We are two cities that share very dramatic population growth, huge issues of congestion, of pollution, how to cope with the problems of success. I hope very much that this is a productive and useful conference. I'm delighted that I'm represented today by my Deputy Mayor and Chief of Staff, Sir Edward Lister. I hope very much that everybody enjoys today's Moscow Urban Forum. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Boris Johnson, the Mayor of London. We now have a message from the Governor of Tokyo, Mr. Naoki Inoshi, and this message will be read to us by the former Vice Governor, Mr. Yasushi Ayama. Thank you very much.
My name is Yasushi Aoyama, and I will talk about Tokyo next session. But in this session, I will read the message from Governor Inose. Dear Mayor Sobyanin and all participants, may I congratulate you on hosting and being held the third Moscow Urban Forum. Please forgive me for being unable to accept your kind invitation to attend due to other official duties. I understand that this third forum will discuss the subject of development of areas beyond the center of the megacity based on the forum's aim to deepen discussion on sustainable urban development among the mayors of leading global cities and many other experts. I would like to take this opportunity to introduce Tokyo's experiences and initiatives regarding the development of Tokyo's outer areas. The reorganization of communities in the suburbs in advancing in Tokyo, centering on transit-oriented development, in which commercial and business facilities and administrative and healthcare services are concentrated around the main train stations. In addition, roads, public facilities, and relaxing large-scale parks are also being built by concentrating and rearranging land use of large plots of vacated land, such as the former site of a U.S. base. Along the railway lines linking Tokyo to the suburbs, train stations are at the center of a project to develop facilities needed for everyday life, such as transportation paths and commercial facilities, by making adjustments to the shape of the land and redeveloping old built-up areas. With a few exceptions, the local municipalities play a central role in the implementation of this project, and the Tokyo Metropolitan Government cooperates in the formulation of plans and provision of technical guidance. The cities of Moscow and Tokyo have built cooperative relations as sister cities since 1991. I sincerely hope that we will continue to cooperate in urban development and many other fields and deepen our bonds of friendship even more. In conclusion, I would like to express my deepest respect to all those who have dedicated their efforts to host this meeting and wish the forum the greatest of success. Yours sincerely, Naoki Inose, Governor of Tokyo, Tokyo Metropolitan Government. Thank you very much.
So our thanks to the Mayor of Moscow, the Mayor of London, and the Governor of Tokyo for their introductory remarks and their welcome for this forum. And now, colleagues, we move to the first plenary session, where we discuss the balanced urban development in the megacities. Is it an opportunity or is it a necessity? Do the megacities of the world concentrate too much on the city center at the expense of the metropolitan area as a whole? Are there costs and consequences for failing to address the outer areas? And are there solutions emerging in one city, in one country, which are useful for another city in another country? Now, to discuss this theme, we're going to present first some unique research that has been undertaken especially for this forum. The research is entitled The Archaeology of the Periphery. Following the presentation of the research, I will be inviting our city leaders from London, from Sao Paulo, and from Tokyo to debate the issues that the research has raised and to describe to us what have been the successful initiatives or the problems faced in addressing success beyond the center of their cities. So to present the research, please will you welcome once again to the stage Yuri Gregorian from the Strelka Institute, and he is joined by Justin McGurk, who is the editor-in-chief of Strelka Press. Thank you very much. The researchers, please come to the platform.
Я хотел сначала
First, I would like to say a few words. It's interdisciplinary research that we have carried out. It has an international aspect that Justin will present, and after that I will speak about the portion of the research was dedicated to Moscow. Justin.
Good morning. I believe I have 5 minutes to present the theme, or to introduce the theme of this conference, which is the periphery. So forgive me if this moves very fast, but the question is, why the periphery? The answer is because cities face new challenges in the 21st century. And while growth remains one of them, we also want cities that are sustainable and livable. And achieving that will depend on our attitude to the periphery. We know that most urban growth this century will take place in the developing world. And outside of China, most of that urbanization will be informal. By 2030, 2 billion people will be living in slums, mostly on the periphery. In Africa, for instance, Africa is the first continent to experience mass urbanization without mass industrialization. The result of that is a shift from planned cities to spontaneous cities. This is a crucial issue, and yet, for the last 2 decades, the rhetoric or the agenda of urban policies has been focused on the city center and reviving city centers. In a sense, there's a cult of the city center, which looks something like this: Barcelona, with its cathedrals and plazas and tight-knit, walkable city streets. But we now need to shift to a cult of the periphery, arguably. Cities can't continue to sprawl in the manner that they did in the 20th century, and yet they must grow. The implications of that will be the reimagining of peripheries as sites of enormous potential. If we look at a few archetypes, just for background, this is London, the first megacity, which invented suburbia, and it was also inventing urban sprawl, although it also in the 90s led the charge in terms of reviving the city center. There's Paris, which has a very different kind of suburb, much denser, high-rise, but also gave rise to marginalization and social alienation, qualities that we're anxious to avoid this century if possible. Los Angeles, the very definition of urban sprawl, but this also represented a middle-class revolt against the city, against city living and taxation. And yet, in the second half of the 20th century, Los Angeles redefined itself as one of the densest cities in America. Latin America holds important lessons for the developing world in terms of urbanization, because it experienced mass urbanization long before China and Africa, which are the real kind of growth zones today. Mexico City is one, and this is Ciudad Neza, an informal settlement in the periphery. Remember that Mexico City has 20 million people, and most of those live in the periphery. In Ciudad Neza, and in other informal communities, they build 100,000 homes a year in Mexico on the periphery. At the same time, there's formal growth, which looks like this in Mexico, cookie cutter, monoculture developments, which do nothing for quality of life in the city. Sao Paulo, another megalopolis, if you will, that experienced mass migration from the countryside in the middle of the 20th century and in the 70s and 80s especially. This image shows the social polarization that created between middle-class centers and largely poor peripheries, not exclusively but largely. And that informal growth was in part a result of a failure of government housing policies which moved the poor to the periphery in substandard housing like this and forced people to make their own homes instead. Tokyo is arguably a model of cities looking to the future because it's polycentric. A ring road city like Moscow, it's currently the largest city in the world, and it's polycentric, centered around hubs like Shibuya and Shinjuku, and developing the polycentric city is arguably one of the challenges of the 21st century. And these challenges are not just about growth, but about transformation. Peripheries in the 20th century were symptoms of growth, but now we face new problems as well. In Europe and Russia, for instance, some cities are shrinking. How do you deal with that? Peripheries, aside from being growth areas, are also a social issue. We have to avoid the social polarization of the past, where peripheries are either zones for the rich or for the poor. Moscow is a fascinating case study, as we'll see. And we need to move from divisive cities to inclusive cities. Moscow's still growing. It's got no natural border, like a river or a mountain range, nor does it have an artificial border, like London's green zone, green belt. So it's going to take political will to keep this growth manageable. Instead of creating new peripheries, arguably it needs to look to the periphery it already has and transform it. How will it do that? By focusing on what makes Moscow unique. It's a time for the city to appreciate the enormous legacy of communism. The microrayons are a site of enormous potential. They represent vast amounts of publicly owned land, and this land can be used in a denser way. This is a classic microrayon for non-Muscovites. And when I say used in a denser way, I'm not just talking about housing. The architect Teddy Cruz says we need a new concept of density, not just a number of units per acre, but a number of social and economic exchanges per acre. This, I would say, is a key way of reimagining the microrayons of Moscow. Can we reconsider them not just as dormitory suburbs, but can we imagine them as lively, productive zones with dense transport connections, new enterprise, and new cultural institutions? On that note, I'm going to hand over to Yuri for real expertise on this amazing city.
Спасибо. Спасибо, Justin.
Thank you, Justin. First of all, in the beginning, I'd like to tell you why this research is called Archaeology of Periphery. When we start this study, we thought that those periphery region of Moscow and suburbs is not just a waste area. There is also a value which is also part of our legacy from our previous managers of the city, and we were very cautious in making this survey of periphery, and we have placed Moscow in the context of other global cities and tried to understand the index of the size of this periphery. And here you see a ratio of the center compared with the area of the whole city. And you can just see with what kind of size of territories we are going to deal in every specific case. Then distribution of the population density and compare it with the transportation services. Here you see the density of population in Moscow, Istanbul, Paris, Sao Paulo, and Tokyo. And this is the mapping of accessibility of public transport. And we did it with mobility and chain, Italian engineers, and accessibility of 5 minutes to the nearest point, which could give you access to the transportation system. And here on this slide, in different cities, it is correlated differently, the accessibility of transport and density. In Istanbul and Sao Paulo, the peaks of density, they do not match the accessibility of transport. And in Paris and in Tokyo, we got a match. In this respect, in Moscow, of course, the density of population is placed there where the accessibility of transport is lower. And the transportation program, which is in place today, will help us to avoid this problem. And the structure of Moscow agglomeration is a classical monocentric city, and we have several rings from Kremlin to the real city, where we single out the ring of city periphery. We do have the areas beyond the Moscow circular ring, but we have taken the space between the third transportation ring and the Moscow circular road, and we try to find the potential of development right in that area. I will enumerate several challenges which we could face if we don't have the strategy of periphery development. This is a spontaneous development of the city if we don't have a strategy. There is also a threat to lose control for land resources, for the structure means public use of city space and land. Third, transportation congestions and inadequate territorial communication. And here we have to place special emphasis to southeastern areas where this congestion is very dramatic, and also degradation of the environment and deterioration of the quality of lifestyle. And also the diversity challenge and the threat to lose the Moscow identity, which was commented upon by Justice. And I will tell you about the structure. It is called space. This is sociology as a society, policy as a management tool, and city building. It's architecture, culture, economics, and big data. And I will tell you what we have found from each section, for I have a limited time. I will start from architecture and culture. And what we found in this space, 73.4% is accessible for pedestrians. Openness and free planning create excellent potential of accessibility, of using this land for huge projects. From the viewpoint of culture, we made a mapping and a scanning of modern Moscow, which still carries the traces of socialist modernist projects. And we have identified the so-called spontaneous centers, which Mr. Levsin meta-cities, Marina Sokol's Akademicheskaya and Profsoyuzная, and we believe that it is necessary today to study those spontaneous centers and to analyze whether they would be able to correlate with the sleeping living quarters which were planned before in the past. And there are two more surveys which were dedicated to the study of life, society, and Mr. Levinson was in charge, and Alexei Novikov. And it turned out that, along with other factors, that 62% of people, they move less than once per week, and about 40 people are living in these micro regions less than 30 years. And this is a very interesting potential to consider these areas as communities. And we also use the data of megaphone mobile phones to understand the correspondence which goes through the zone of Moscow periphery. And one of the finds is the rapid movement demonstrates 40% of agglomeration, and half, it means that the load on these trunks, when we develop the so-called chord roads, will minimize traffic twice. The next thing was presented by Alexey Muratov, economics, Alexey Novikov, and it was done by the Institute of Economy of the City. And if we talk about the economics, so the dense construction areas creates cyclic mechanism of degradation. And you have to remember that Moscow agglomeration is number 25 economy and could be comparable like Iran and Sweden. And as for today, those disproportions with unique structure where the quality of life deteriorates, we believe it's one of the most important things we have to pay attention to. We cannot create density construction areas, and this is very important to avoid this approach. In the section of politics, we have analyzed several levels of management from agglomeration to a living block and creating the communities of flat owners. And this is the major potential which we have today, that the footprint in the city is twice as less as in the standard block areas building. And today, the most important thing is availability of land, and this is presented in this report. So the basic potentials and opportunities which were revealed as a result of our survey, in our opinion, is that the open space and open areas make it possible for the use of creation of a comprehensive environmental framework of the city. And we could make this city walkable, and we can also say that this territory is potentially a great park in the future. So these spontaneous centers beyond the area of the center itself, you have to correlate, and they are marked here in red, and we believe that these are the so-called sleeping living quarters. They are not activated, and we have to involve them in this circulation as the major city space. And what we also mentioned here, the shaping of local social capital could happen proceeding from the numbers that 37% are living there more than 30 years, and 38% are living more than 10 years. And this is a good factor to consolidate those communities, to help to manage those territories, and the profit from valuable assets like living quarters, land, and commercial real estate could be used to improve the quality of life in this city. And we have to analyze that hidden capital on those territories to be responsible to the future generation. And this is also a source of tremendous information. And we have revealed most interesting semantic analysis and to assess the events and places and moderate transportation flows. And the data management, the use of technologies is a very burning problem of today. We have to generate a general strategy of development of the city periphery to use the open space to enhance the competition on the living quarters market in order to stop the deterioration of and degradation of this environment, to balance the construction of living quarters on these areas, to develop small and medium business in to discontinue construction of large supermarkets and commercial centers, and they create an absolutely different lifestyle for the people, making them just to consume the social space inside those mega markets, and to use this data in different management approaches and development today. It's not just building of new blocks. It's the work with the area and with the land, which we have as a legacy. And I believe altogether we could create such a strategy to develop Moscow periphery. Thank you.
Yuri, Justin, thank you very much indeed. It's impossible in 15 minutes to do justice to this amazing work, and I hope you will take the opportunity to read The Archaeology of the Periphery. They have said that in the 21st century, to embrace the kind of urbanism we have, we must move away from the cult of the center and develop a new cult of the periphery. They've said that if you map the processes of urban growth and change in the major cities of the world, what you discover is the potential of the outer areas to contribute more, but the need for the outer areas to be part of a development strategy. And then Yuri has concluded that Moscow in particular has an opportunity to overcome its previous path of monocentric development and to embrace its periphery as an opportunity for growth, for livability, and for identity. So thank you very much indeed. Now we're going to hear from our city leaders from London, from Sao Paulo, and from Tokyo to talk about their approaches to success beyond the center of their cities. And it's a great pleasure to welcome to the platform Sir Edward Lister, the Deputy Mayor of London.
Good morning, and thank you for giving me the opportunity of attending this conference and for speaking to you. And I'm delighted that I'm here to represent the Mayor of London. We in London have a particular challenge. We are seeing the kind of population growth that we've not seen for over 100 years. And therefore, we have to manage that growth, and we have to manage the economy in such a way that we can protect the city and everything that's valuable within the city, but at the same time be able to cater for many, many more people. And I'm going to this morning outline some of our challenges and some of our strategies. But the most important one, and the one that is the subject of today's conference, is we have to realize the potential of the area around our city. And in our case, it's the Outer London area. It's the housing potential, the commercial and the industrial opportunities which that gives us. Economies all over the world are dependent upon their cities. Population hubs which drive business, culture, jobs, economic growth. And the first tenet for all of us that are involved in cities is that we have to ensure that we recognize the role of the city to provide economic growth for our citizens. And we, for ourselves in London, look very much upon the city as being a series of villages. Over the years, these villages have grown and become the city. But we yearn for the idea of the village. And even today, when you walk around London, you can still see that it is a collection of 150 villages and town centres, now more or less merged into one and connected and linked by public transport. But as the global economy changes and evolves beyond all recognition, the leading cities of the world must adapt and change. And if we don't adapt and change, we will lose our advantages. And there is a lot of research out there which shows that cities can contract just as easily as they can grow if they don't handle this all in the right way. If you fly over London, you will see that we are a little bit different from other comparable cities. Most European cities, and indeed most great cities of the world, have a central area which is more or less low-rise, and a radial area which is much more high-rise residential developments. That's how it largely works. We're different. We're a sprawling city, a sort of Victorian Los Angeles, and it's very much about, for us, low-rise housing around a central core which is much more high-rise. And you see this difference. And we have in London a document called the London Plan. This is our planning Bible, which all developers have to read and understand, because you won't get planning permission to build unless you do. And this sets out everything from the size, or the minimum size of apartments, right the way through to how much green space you must provide, what play facilities have got to be there, what transport has to be there, what car parking, and so on. And all this is laid out. And this is very important, because if we are to grow and expand our population, we must do so while at the same time protecting all that is valuable and successful within the city. So in order to do this, the mayor decided very early on to establish an Outer London Commission. This is a group of experts who had a specific job to look at Outer London and what needed to be done to expand and also protect Outer London. And the questions we asked ourselves were, what sort of employment should we be promoting in the outskirts of London? What is the skill base that we need, and what should we promote? Where do we put our tall buildings? Where is it appropriate? And we believe very strongly that is about clustering tall buildings together. How do we do all this without destroying or badly affecting the much-loved fabric of the outer London suburbs? How do we build authenticity without affecting the quality of people's lives? For example, how do we ensure that we keep, on that photograph you saw of London, how do we keep all those back gardens without building over everything? Above all, how can we intensify and increase density in some parts of London? And how do we create those super hubs that we need? So that was our questions. Our challenge, I suppose, is our population. We are a slightly smaller city than the others on the platform. We're a city of 8.4 million within our periphery. 8.4 million, but we are growing to 9 million by 2020 and 10 million by 2030. So we have to accommodate about 100,000 more people per year. And And that itself is a challenge. And so that means we need to build at the rate of about 55,000 homes a year. But we need more employment space. We need more school places because of our budgeting school population. We need more hotel rooms, and I can go on. The whole fabric of the city needs to expand. And we need to do that by at the same time building within the periphery of the city, because we have a barrier around us, a green ring around the city which we cannot build on, and we therefore need to constrain our construction. So we are doing it by looking at our brownfield land, and that's where we believe we can get about 80% of our growth. And it is about developing the old areas of London, areas like the docks, which have ceased to be economically viable and are now going to be the main centres for housing and for industry. And we believe the bulk of this can be done within the city. And with that, we can build the infrastructure. And we started to look at that infrastructure. What do we need? Because all of this, these areas, and we've got about 33 of them around the city, have a reason that they've never been developed before. And usually it's an infrastructure problem. And that infrastructure problem is normally always transport related. So it is about building new railway lines, creating new bridges, new roads. All of this is very expensive. So it's also about how do we as a city raise the kind of monies that we need to pay for this. And some of these bills are extremely high. But it doesn't just stop there. It's also about electricity, it's about gas, it's about water. All of these infrastructure areas have to be built up to feed that growth in our outer London area. But if we can do that, we can keep our population within our city, and we can at the same time make sure that the city preserves its green and open feel, but at the same time take that extra population. So thank you.
Sir Edward, thank you very much. You called London a kind of 19th century Los Angeles, but a city that now has a plan. And you focused on the Outer London Commission, the group that you set up to think about the outskirts of London. And you talked about growing London inside the green belt, and therefore densification, brownfield regeneration, and most important, as you said at the end, investment in infrastructure to connect Outer London to itself and to central London better. Thank you very much indeed. We'll now have the Secretary for Urban Development from the city of Sao Paulo, Mr. Fernando de Melo Franco. Mr. Fernando Franco, the floor is yours.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to thank you, first of all, the invitation. I would say that Sao Paulo needs to grow. Sao Paulo needs to be transformed. And why? Due to the fact Sao Paulo has suffered from a very fast, incomplete modernization process. So we have about 1/3 of the population living on informal conditions, which means that we have to transform. We have to provide city where city doesn't exist at all. The question is, how can we do this? Actually, Sao Paulo is settled on a watershed surrounded by a collection of hills and rainforest. Actually, Sao Paulo has one of the top 5 rainforests settled on urban area of the world, which is such a wealth, such a value that has to be kept. So Sao Paulo cannot go beyond its limits. So Sao Paulo has to be transformed from inside. Once more, the question is, how can we do this? I think that Yuri has showed us that densification and mobility in Sao Paulo are two things that don't match each other. So we have a clue, we have a key, and the key is to transform Sao Paulo through the implementation, the expansion of its transportation network. Actually, we have just a few kilometers of metro lines and bus lines in Sao Paulo nowadays, and our goal, our challenge is to accelerate the implementation of a huge public transportation system. So this will provide us such an opportunity for transforming Sao Paulo in a different way. We're not talking about changing downtown area, the center. We're not talking about transforming the periphery. They are areas, they are zones of the city. We're talking about transforming the city's systems, which means something slightly different. Since high-rise model in Sao Paulo doesn't mean densification, and since horizontal low-rise in Sao Paulo means a high level of densification, we also have to think new models of construction that allows the city to densify close to the transportation new accesses. And this is the goal. We're not worried about only providing new real estate developments close to the new axis. We also are articulating all the public policies concerning public facilities, green and open areas, commercial zones, and so to be basically implemented where the transportation system will be provided. And this network will have somehow a very strange design, which means a kind of rhizomatic network that will allow every single node of this network to be reinforced as old and new centralities that will expand this polycentric necessity of a big metropolis like Sao Paulo. And since to implement the new transportation systems, we will be able to transform narrow streets to allow BRTs to pass by, we will make this process a kind of machine for producing wasteland. Half of each plot will be used for the transportation system, for enlarging the roads, but part of those plots will be lost. So we're developing a land policy that can collect those little pieces of land to allow us to provide new opportunities for implementing especially social housing in the city, which is quite important because this will be a way not to keep the dichotomy between rich and central areas against poor and peripheral areas. If we can allow a housing policy to be settled along the mobility axis, so we can offer opportunities for all, for including a population that today is really far from the job and services opportunities. But Sao Paulo cannot be seen just in the municipal level. We have to think on the metropolitan level as well. The city of Sao Paulo itself is about 11 million inhabitants. The metropolitan area is about 20 million inhabitants. And we have any level of metropolitan governance, which is such a problem. And this is a very specific political problem that needs to be solved into a federal level as well. But the metropolitan area is not enough. Sao Paulo is growing, and it's growing beyond the metropolitan area, the metropolitan limits. Now we talk about the macro metropolis. And what's about the macro metropolis? The macro metropolis collects Sao Paulo in the center of a huge region, which is conformed by 5 metropolitan regions, Sao Paulo plus 4, south, north, east, and west, separated by 100 kilometers each one. And actually, the rest of the macro metropolis is the area that is growing quite fast. And why? This is due industrialization. Sao Paulo was and is somehow the biggest industrial city in the South Hemisphere. But the city itself is losing manufacturing, is losing for all the metropolitan areas around Sao Paulo. So we have to think how the economy can be connected. We're talking about adding value on the productive chain in terms of what is happening inside Sao Paulo. Of course, services are growing and growing fast inside the city, but manufacturing has a big role in the region. And all the services based on Sao Paulo, actually, they are totally connected with the manufacturing that is around the metropolitan area. So we're not talking about just thinking on a post-industrial city, a post-industrial metropolis, but we have to understand how manufacturing can play such an important role in one much more complex network of metropolitan areas that are all connected and separated by green areas used for agriculture, but basically extremely important for also tourism, ecotourism, which can provide a possibility for developing the periphery in a way that we cannot add a strong economical value for those areas and for the population who live on the spaces in between the metropolitan regions, but we can organize such an economy that can bring social impact for this extremely vulnerable population. So those are the goals Sao Paulo has in distinct levels, and that needs first to build a strong alliance between the municipality level, the governor level, and the federal level. Thank you.
Mr. Secretary, thank you very much indeed. You describe Sao Paulo as a city that has had a very fast but incomplete urbanization process, and you talked about the need to re-engineer the city using the transformation of the city's systems by synchronizing new transport investment with new housing in a new pattern of urbanization and planned urban development. And then you went on to talk about the macro metropolis, the greater Sao Paulo region with its 5 metropolitan areas, and the need to synchronize their managed urbanization with economic transformation and modernization in order to build quality of life. So thank you very much indeed. We now go from London to Sao Paulo to Tokyo, and we welcome the former Vice Governor of Tokyo, Yasushi Aomama. Thank you very much. The floor is yours. There.
I think that it's very important the grade separated urban highway network, especially ring road and ring railways system is very important. Tokyo has 11 ring road and 3 ring railways. In Tokyo, traffic congestion is less severe in Tokyo than in New York. I think that ring road system and especially grade separated urban highway, especially inner city highway, grade separated is very important.
Thank you very much indeed. So Tokyo's great lesson for the rest of the world, the ring road system and the ring rail system, creating orbital connectivity through the outer areas with one another. Thank you very much indeed, gentlemen, for your comments. I'm going to ask you just one question, and then I will invite our host, the Mayor of Moscow, to come back to the stage. He's going to come now. So, Mayor of Moscow, please join us again. Please welcome back our host, the Mayor of Moscow.
Surprising to hear the representatives of London, Sao Paulo, as if they're talking about the Moscow city. For the problems they've been talking about, they are similar in developing any megalopolis. And without changing our strategy, the development of megacities is simply impossible, and we have a common opinion of all the colleagues we have here. And in Moscow, we also took the decision to change the global city building policy. We are moving to the direction of polycentric development and taking very serious decisions. And in recent years, we have discontinued various city building projects with the total capacity of 25 million square meters. It's big cities, and we discontinued those construction works, but we have sustained or maintained the dynamics of development and investments into the development of the city to manage those territories which were vacant, and also pay attention to the outskirts of the city to make peripheral area more comfortable for living and more comfortable for living, and both for living and work. And this is one of the major tasks of the city. On the one hand, to ensure the further development of the city, and secondly, to make this development in a more correct and promising way. And my colleagues mentioned here that we have to ensure the good communication with outskirts, and we have the largest in the world transportation program, the construction of the metro lines which will reach another quarter of Moscow areas, and we also work intensively with the road construction of cord communication so that to minimize the distances which the citizen has to travel. It's also very important to mention that we are constructing two transition hubs, both on the railroad and metro. And in Tokyo, our colleagues said that they had 3 transition hubs between railroads and metro. In Moscow, in 5 or 7 years, we're going to have 2 more transition hubs, which will integrate this communication and will reduce the travel distance if you move from the center to other areas of the city. When we speak about peripheral areas of Moscow, we always think to make these living quarters most comfortable, and if we see the distribution of the budget of the city of Moscow in terms of making these areas more comfortable, 2/3 are directed to the outskirts of the city, and refurbishing plans are really very attractive. Sometimes they're even more impressive than if we compared it with the center of Moscow, where the place is very congested. And we have created about 30 kilometers of walkable roads, and we are planning to accomplish one more program just to understand where the flow of people is greater, where we can create walkable areas and the largest flow of pedestrians. That is the channels which lead to the transportation hubs. And we are developing the program where on a radius of 1.5 kilometers from the station of metro, we try to connect all the pedestrian lines and other transportation lines to make it more comfortable for the person to come to these places. And in this connection, a great role is being played by the city authorities and local management, and this is one of the priorities of our work and effort. And we have given more authority to the local bodies of management, of authorities, and we also distribute more funds to be under their direct control. And we're talking about the sum of $800 million, which will be spent by the local authorities to make the life of their areas better. Of course, our colleagues analyzed our suburban areas and the areas around the ring roads, but our cities, they do not limit themselves by administrative borders, but we are living in a much larger city than the boundaries of the Moscow ring road. There are about 12 million people in Moscow and around 8 million around Moscow, and we have to take into account these numbers while developing Moscow plans and the plans to develop the region where we have more than 20 million people. And we execute such programs like development of suburban railroads. We reconstruct about 200 roads of suburban highways, and also the reconstruction of the large circular ring. We're working together with the Ministry of Transport and regional authorities. And as a whole, I would like to thank my colleagues with the very interesting presentations. And they are extremely valuable for all cities of the world and are of special value to the city of Moscow. Thank you, and thank you for being here with us.
Mr. Mayor, thank you very much indeed. So we have the case studies from London, from Sao Paulo, from Tokyo, and from Moscow on the strategies for addressing success beyond the center of the cities. We're going to close this session in a moment, but let me just summarize what has been said. Firstly, everyone has said we must recognize the outer areas, their potential, their challenges, what they can contribute in terms of identity, and we must plan for and manage the whole city, not just the center. The second thing we have heard is that transportation connectivity is the critical ingredient for opening up the outer areas and giving them a new dynamic. The third thing we have heard is that the reallocation of land and the densification of land around new housing, new initiatives, and movements towards polycentricity are very important for the outer areas to succeed. None of our speakers have said it is a choice between the outer areas and the central areas. None of them have said it is a choice between being polycentric and better connecting the center and the outer areas. During the course of today, you will participate in many sessions that will debate and discuss the core questions around livability, economics, transportation, housing, identity, community participation, and at the end of the day today, we will have another plenary where you will hear about some of the exciting initiatives that are happening in the outer areas of the other great cities of the world. With that, and with thanks to our host, the Mayor of Moscow, I am closing this session, and I invite you to thank our researchers, our city leaders for their contributions. Thank you very much indeed.